Look closely at this photograph. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary picture of a plane taking off. But hidden beneath that aircraft is something almost nobody notices. A human being. A boy. Frozen forever in a single frame as he falls from the sky. What makes this image even more disturbing is that nobody intended to capture it. The photographer didn't know what he had photographed. The people watching didn't immediately understand what they had seen. And the boy in the image had no idea that within seconds, his dream of seeing the world would become a tragedy remembered for generations. Who was he? Why was he there? And how did one ordinary photograph become one of the most haunting images ever taken? This is the story of Keith Sapsford, the boy who wanted to see the world, and the photograph that captured his final moments. A boy who could never stay still. In the 1960s, Sydney, Australia was rapidly changing. Commercial air travel was opening the world in ways previous generations could only imagine. Airports had become gateways to distant countries, different cultures, and endless possibilities. For most people, airplanes represented travel. For Keith Sapsford, they represented freedom. Keith was born in 1956 and grew up in Sydney. By all accounts, he was intelligent, curious, adventurous, and constantly searching for something beyond his immediate surroundings. His father later described him as a wanderer, someone who always seemed to have an urge to keep moving. While many children dreamed about adventures, Keith seemed consumed by them. He wanted to explore. He wanted to discover. Most importantly, he wanted to see the world for himself. His parents understood this curiosity. In fact, they even took him on an overseas trip. Many parents would assume that such an experience would satisfy a child's desire for adventure. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Seeing foreign places only made Keith want more. Much more. The growing obsession. As Keith entered his teenage years, his desire to travel became increasingly difficult to control. He began running away from home. Not because he hated his family. Not because he was escaping abuse. But because he was searching for something he couldn't quite explain. The world felt bigger than the life he was living, and he desperately wanted to experience it. His father grew concerned. Like many parents, he worried that Keith's obsession with adventure was leading him toward dangerous decisions. Eventually, a decision was made. Keith would be sent to Boys Town, a Catholic institution designed to provide discipline and guidance to troubled young people. The hope was simple. Structure would help him. Rules would help him. Stability would help him. But there was one problem. Keith didn't want stability. He wanted adventure. The escape. In February 1970, Keith escaped. He had spent only a short time at the institution before running away. Nobody could have predicted where he would go next. Most runaway teenagers head toward familiar places. Friends, family, neighborhoods they know. Keith headed somewhere else. Sydney Airport, one of the busiest airports in Australia. A place filled with aircraft leaving for destinations across the globe. To Keith, every departing plane represented a possibility. Tokyo, Hong Kong, Manila, cities he had never seen, cultures he had never experienced, lives he could only imagine. And somewhere in that airport, a dangerous idea began to form. If he couldn't buy a ticket, maybe he could travel another way. A deadly decision. Today, airport security is extremely strict. But in 1970, things were different. Keith somehow gained access to an area near a Japan Airlines DC-8 preparing for departure. The aircraft was scheduled to leave Sydney and continue toward Asia. To a teenager obsessed with exploration, it must have looked like the perfect opportunity. Keith climbed into the landing gear compartment, also known as the wheel well, the space where the aircraft's wheels fold after takeoff. What happened next is heartbreaking because it appears Keith didn't fully understand how dangerous this area was. He reportedly positioned himself on the wheel compartment doors. He may have believed he had found a hidden space where he could remain unnoticed throughout the flight. But aircraft wheel wells are not storage compartments. They are moving mechanical systems. And within minutes, that decision would become fatal. What Keith didn't know. Let's pause for a moment, because understanding what Keith didn't know makes this story even more tragic. When an airplane takes off, the landing gear doesn't stay extended. The wheels retract. To do this, large doors open underneath the aircraft. The wheels fold inside. Then the doors close again. If a person is sitting on those doors when they open, there is nothing beneath them. Nothing at all. Even if Keith had survived this phase, his chances of surviving the entire flight would have been extremely small. Wheel well stowaways face crushing hazards, oxygen deprivation, freezing temperatures, and loss of consciousness. Historically, most wheel well stowaways do not survive. But Keith never reached those dangers, because another danger arrived first. Gravity. February 22nd, 1970. The engines roared. The aircraft accelerated down the runway. Passengers settled into their seats. Crew members prepared for departure. Nobody on board knew a 14-year-old boy was hidden beneath them. The DC-8 lifted off. The wheels left the ground. The aircraft began climbing. Then the landing gear retraction sequence started. The wheel well doors opened. And Keith fell. Approximately 200 feet. Only moments after takeoff. His dream of seeing the world ended almost instantly. Hundreds of witnesses. What's astonishing is that Keith's fall was not hidden. There were reportedly hundreds of people watching aircraft departures from an observation area near the airport. Many saw something falling, but from a distance, they couldn't immediately identify it. Some thought it looked like a bag. Others weren't sure what they had witnessed. The reality was almost impossible to process. A teenage boy had just fallen from a departing passenger jet. But the strangest part of the story was still unfolding, because one person nearby had unknowingly captured the entire moment. The photograph. His name was John Gilpin, a young amateur photographer. That day, he wasn't investigating a story. He wasn't documenting an accident. He was simply testing a new camera lens. He pointed his camera toward departing aircraft, pressed the shutter, and moved on. According to his own account, he never saw anyone fall. He had no idea anything unusual had happened. In fact, he only heard people discussing an incident later. Then a thought crossed his mind. What if his camera had captured something? A week later, he developed the film. And there it was, frame after frame. A plane climbing into the sky, and beneath it, a falling figure. The final moments of a 14-year-old boy's life. A photograph that refused to be forgotten. Many tragic events disappear from public memory, but this one didn't. Because photographs have a unique power. They freeze time. They force us to look. And this image was unlike anything people had ever seen. It wasn't staged. It wasn't edited. It wasn't recreated. It was real. One fraction of a second preserved forever. Eventually, the photograph appeared in newspapers and magazines. Decades later, it would resurface online. Each new generation encountering it for the first time. Each new viewer asking the same question. Who was that boy? And why was he there? A father's heartbreaking words. Perhaps the saddest part of this story comes from Keith's father. After the tragedy, he tried to explain what had driven his son. The answer wasn't crime. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't hatred. It was curiosity, adventure, and a desire to experience life beyond his immediate world. His father reportedly said, "All my son wanted to do was see the world." A simple sentence, yet one that explains almost everything. The lesson hidden in the photograph. When people see this image today, they often focus on the fall, the tragedy, the shock. But the deeper story is about something many people can understand. The desire for more, the desire to explore, the feeling that the world is bigger than the place where you were born. Those feelings are not wrong. In fact, they drive some of humanity's greatest achievements. But Keith's story reminds us that dreams without understanding can become dangerous. Curiosity without caution can become deadly. And sometimes a single decision can change everything. More than half a century has passed since that day in Sydney. The airport is different. The planes are different. The world is different. Yet one photograph remains. A grainy image frozen in time. A plane climbing toward distant countries. A boy falling away from it. And a dream that never had the chance to come true. The next time you see that photograph, look carefully. Not at the plane, not at the fall, but at the story behind it. Because hidden inside that single frame is a reminder of how powerful curiosity can be, and how fragile a human life really is. A young boy wanted to see the world. Instead, the world would remember him through a single photograph. A photograph that captured one moment, and preserved it forever. Fade to black.